Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending upon the time zone that you're joining us from, and welcome to our webinar today called Beyond Biotech: Building a Life Sciences Platform that Generates Revenue while Developing Breakthrough Therapies. We have a very interesting webinar for you today for a very interesting pharmaceutical investment opportunity that is presenting itself in the form of NextGen. Now, NextGen is a company that has been set up to invest in another company, which is Ionics, and that group. Genzada, Genzada and Hyatt, and you'll hear a lot of these companies' names kind of rolling around, and we'll talk about how they fit in together. But you've essentially got a what is it? Taken together, the markets that NextGen is going to be operating in collectively approach $3.3 trillion in by 2030, 2032. Very exciting opportunity here. Most biotech companies ask investors to wait for years, sometimes decades, for a return. I'm sure that some of the investors on today have been through opportunities like that. The excitement about pharmaceutical investments is the potential for enormous returns, but also it's very much a you die or you're winning type of approach. And NextGen set up just a little bit differently. So normal biotechs, when they're approaching trials, they burn cash, they run the trials, they hope the science holds. That's the traditional model. NextGen Scientific, we're built differently here. So it's a life sciences platform, is what they consider it. And that platform has essentially two important cogs. The first cog, of course, is the one that you're all going to be excited about, which is the pharmaceutical side. They have two exciting products that are in advanced trials right now that we'll be talking about today. But not just that. They started it from the very beginning by understanding that the basis for those products that they're offering on the pharmaceutical side also holds a lot of interest on the in terms of supplement side, nutraceutical side. So they set up this Hyatt entity, and the Hyatt entity holds all of the supplement business. It brings in real revenue dollars today that can assist with the money that's needed for that approach to the pharmaceutical. So while this is a company that is going to need money for those trials, and that's serious need for money and serious also potential for huge benefit, but also bringing in revenue producing from day one investment opportunity, very unusual in the pharmaceutical side. Now, we talked about the collectively approaching 3.3 trillion by 2030. Let's talk about some other numbers. The global oncology market surpassed $220 billion in 2024, and it's on track to grow to double digits through 2030. And we have two clinical stage drugs targeting that market right now. On the dietary supplement side, the Hyatt side of the industry, it's forecast to reach $759 billion by 2034. If those numbers sound pretty good to you, we got a lot more to discuss today. Um, just a little bit of housekeeping before I introduce our main talker for today. Just a quick thank you to all of our attendees for joining, and do mention to your friends and other investor groups that you might be part of that this offering is here, and share with them maybe some of the insights that you learned today. In terms of how this webinar is going to work, you can ask questions during the webinar. We will see those questions when they get asked. At the end, we will address as many of those live questions as we can at the end. If we don't have live questions, we'll ask some of our own as well. All of the attendees will be muted during the course of the webinar. Um, and just a little bit of in terms of compliance. It would be remiss of me if I did not tell you that this webinar is for informational purposes only and does not constitute an offer to sell securities. All statements are subject to the private placement memorandum dated January 26th, 2026. My name is Ben DiScipio. I am with Textra Capital. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer there, and I run all of our Reg CF, Reg D, Reg A business here at Textra Capital. We are the broker-dealer of record for this offering with NextGen. And with no further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Jason West. Jason West is the Chief Operating Officer and one of the founders of NextGen. Jason, on your team, you have a lot of exit potential. And I know that exit experience is something that weighs heavily with investors. Why don't we talk a little bit about some of that exit experience on your team before we get into the webinar?
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it very much. So our background, as far as exits, Gene and I were involved in a business in actually a totally separate industry and still chemicals related, chemistry related, but we grew the business from actually zero all the way on up to eventually had an exit in 2013. And that was ended up being right around $300 million exit. So it was a very sizable organization by the time that we had taken it as far as we took it. And then we have another one of our people on our members of our executive team, Stefan Proniak, who's got a lot more background in life sciences and biotech, and he actually had an exit previously in a different entity around a cancer drug as well. So some on-point experience for sure with Stefan, and then obviously some overall experience in exits, sizable exits for the rest of us as well.
So the two most important team members of NextGen produced the $300 million exit previously, and one of your chief scientists also part of a very important exit. Those certainly are important benchmarks to consider as we move into some of the rest of this. Now, Jason, we kind of framed today as this beyond biotech and what a unique offering this is for biotech. Can you talk about what that means to you from a kind of high level view of the entire structure, what it might mean to investors, especially that might be used to investing in pharmaceutical offerings? Let's start by talking about that.
It's a good question. It's probably one of the more intimidating aspects of pharmaceutical drug development it's a very simple fact. We say there's a fine line between hero and goat, and it's easy to say that you have a good molecule. It's much more difficult to actually take it to the finish line, and so we see a lot of examples of companies that have a good idea, but they run into difficulty with their testing protocols or maybe some safety issue that was not foreseen. And so it really is a zero-sum game. You bet on the molecule that you think is best 7 or 8 years ago, and then it's not until many years later that you find out that molecule didn't in fact have promise. But ours is, I think, a little bit unique in the sense that we maybe because we approach things from a different industry, and so we don't have the typical pharmaceutical paradigms, that we looked at it and said, well, I think we can do something different here. It's a little bit make it a safer bet for our investors, and also give us more opportunities for potential success. And so that's why we developed our first drug, GZ17 6.02, and then quickly realized that there's applications outside of just oral oncology because that's a capsule. And then so we created GZ21T as a topical cream. And so the base chemistries are very much the same, but the application, in a topical or an oral delivery method they are different, and they have different developmental paths. So that allows us right away to differentiate ourselves and to create a little bit more of an opportunity for us to be successful with these drug programs. And then, as you mentioned earlier, Ben, I think it's important to note too that we have, our Hyatt Life Sciences platform with our nutraceuticals, and that's a way for us to generate some revenue right off the bat. And it actually was something that we, realized. I'm a little embarrassed to say that we realized very late in the game that there's a value there. It wasn't necessarily our first instinct to develop nutraceuticals, but we said, there's a commercial desire for this, and we kept hearing from people saying, please do this, please do this. So we decided, okay, let's dive into it. And that's how we ended up with nutraceuticals as well.
And that nutraceutical side is bringing in some serious revenue, aren't they? Um, what kind of revenue are you getting from the nutraceutical side right now, and what kind of impact does that make in terms of the rest of it, and how does that affect the pressure that you're under to raise capital for these trials, et cetera?
I would say that it's good revenue. It's reasonable revenue. We feel like we haven't even scratched the surface yet, and we're looking at about just under 2 million in top line revenue this past year, and should exceed that here this coming year. And there's so much additional opportunity and potential here with just nutraceuticals alone. The industry itself is just absolutely enormous, and it's highly differentiated. So there's a lot of players. But one thing that's very unique about our industry, or this industry in particular, is that there's very little in the way of patented products. And so that's what makes Hyatt Life Sciences, we think, very unique right off the bat, is the fact that virtually our entire product line is patented, which is a major selling point for the consumer, the direct to consumer, as well as more of the B2C, or excuse me, the B2B. And so we're going to be leveraging that in the next year and 2 years, and really driving forward with a lot of efforts on the marketing side. And that predominantly is driven by marketing.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, the revenue you've brought in so far has been without marketing, right? It's just been organically marketed to those
Yeah.
people that have interest, and then essentially word of mouth, right? So a
Mhm.
little bit of marketing can go a long way there.
Oh, absolutely. It would not be at all surprising to me if, we're talking in a year or two and we've tripled or quintupled the size of the revenue stream.
Exactly. I mean,
Um,
investors are always looking for investments that not only are great opportunities, but are ripe for their investment dollars going straight to impact. And this is a great example of how a little bit of marketing dollars can make a huge difference in terms of your nutraceutical play. And
Absolutely. And I think you kind of said something very important, a little bit of dollars. It really is not going to take very much for us to devote some dollars out of this raise to grow the nutraceuticals business. So there's a pretty significant value inflection point just with a very small amount of investment. Obviously, the larger investment goes towards the drug research because that's the one that's much more cash consumptive. But we see significant value in that nutraceuticals.
and talk about why you think that it's important, why you built it this way, and why this gives you a competitive advantage versus other potential, cancer drug pharmaceutical offerings that might be around.
I think it largely kind of turns on partially the fact, as we discussed earlier, just the notion that most drug companies, they have one or two drug candidates at various stages of development, and which we haven't really talked about the development stages that we're at right now with our drugs. But if those fail, then the whole company fails. And so we looked at that and said, no, that's not a good model. It's not something that we would feel comfortable, bringing investment into and outside investors into ourselves. So let's build our company a little bit differently. And so that's why we created the oral capsule as well as the topical, and then the nutraceuticals on top of it. But in also, in part, we're using the nutraceutical revenues and the profits derived from it, not to, pay a lot of salary or anything like this. We're driving it back into drug research, and so give us a little bit of time, and I think we can start to self-sustain. And really, we're consuming cash on the drug research side, but we're supplying that cash via the nutraceuticals, which is a unique model that is not very common. It's not unheard of. Bayer is a great example. They're in the pharmaceutical space, of course, with their aspirins, and have been for a long time. And they also own a supplements and nutraceuticals side of their business as well. So the big boys are actually starting to catch on to this notion, and so I think there's precedent for it for sure, and that's why we feel like we're in a good space, in a good place with our work thus far.
Absolutely. And that's a great time for us to segue into, well, tell us a little bit about this pharmaceutical excitement. Um, uh, you've got two, I know, advanced candidates, and I know we want to talk about them. Love to talk about what they're solving as well, because the nice thing about obviously pharmaceuticals involved in the cancer industry is that not only are they impactful investments from an economic standpoint, but they're impactful investments from an impact standpoint. And we can kind of talk a little bit about that.
So I'll back up and tell the story of how we even came up with these drugs in the first place. And it's not uncommon, maybe a few years ago, to basically take inspiration from what you find in nature. And so for thousands of years, people have been using plants and botanicals and roots and things like this for essentially medicinal purposes. And we're if you'll pardon the pun, I apologize. We're kind of just going back to our roots in that respect. And so we found a plant that grows wild in the Middle East, called Arum palestinum. It grows predominantly in and around the areas around Jerusalem. And our founder, Dr. Gene Zaid, is actually from that part of the world originally. And so being familiar with the plant, and knowing that it has been used in continuous use actually for about 11 centuries. So 1100 years that it's been used in that part of the world as what we would think of essentially as an old home remedy, or just a natural type of remedy. And so he, being a chemist, being a PhD medicinal chemist, took the plant, identified molecules that are just naturally occurring in that plant, and lo and behold, it actually did have anti-cancer effect. And so we studied it further, went through the what they're called preclinical testing models. Those are petri dish tests, and then into rodent and non-rodent testing, and then eventually supplied that information to FDA with a plan for clinical trials. And so that's essentially the path that you would take to develop a drug and then take it to clinical trials, which we did, and demonstrated in our what's called a phase 1 clinical trial that the drug is safe for human consumption up to a certain dosage rate. And so that's the long and the short of it is developing those drugs came out of this plant. But along the way, we were preparing this plant in the more traditional methods, and in that part of the world, it's actually brewed as a tea. And so people started hearing about what we were doing, and asked could they get some tea. Because their wife or their cousin or their son was dealing with some form of cancer at the time. And they knew that we were working on cancer treatment and so forth. And so these are folks that we've known. We're a pretty rural part of the United States. And so it's everybody's, tries to be good neighbors to one another out here in Kansas. And So lo and behold, they started taking the tea and came back to tell us multiple times that things were looking better and people were feeling relief and they felt tumors shrinking and so forth. And so we created a nutraceutical out of that tea and converted it. Now it's actually in a capsule form, a powdered capsule. But that's the way the two businesses essentially came to be.
That's certainly a wonderful little story of how it came about, and certainly a way of how you're great neighbors and great neighbors not just to your area but to the world in general because we're doing things that are going to help people. And let's talk a little bit about that. Now, you were talking just a little bit earlier with me prior to the webinar about your the topical cream. Talk about what that is designed to alleviate and kind of what the problem that people are dealing with, and it's a very widespread problem from what I understand.
Oh yes. So it's focused right now in our clinical tests in our clinical trials that we have. We had some already, and those were conducted in Sweden, and that was our phase one clinical trial where we identified that it is in fact safe to put on skin. And then the next step is to test it in a very specific condition called actinic keratosis, or AKs for short. And that's essentially a precancerous condition that, if left untreated, left unchecked, can often turn into skin cancer. And skin cancer generally is the most widely spread and by far the largest in terms of population and cancer incidence rate. And I think 40 to 60% of cases will progress to skin cancer if left untreated. And so our goal with the topical is to address that need because right now there are some effective treatments already on the market for actinic keratosis, but none of them are very desirable. They're extremely hard on the patient, which makes it very difficult for the patient to continue taking the treatments, which decreases effectiveness. Whereas in our case, we have a cream, it's going to, just be rubbed onto the skin or the affected area, and then essentially let it soak in and do its work. And that's a much easier path to what they call patient adherence or patient compliance, versus the other treatments are burning it off with some in the clinic from the dermatologist, which is difficult and time consuming. And then the other one is a cream as well, but it's very aggressive on the skin and will essentially patients don't want to go outside and see anyone when they're being treated for in this manner. So we think we can achieve same or better outcomes for patients, and we believe much better outcomes for patients with very little in the way of downside side effects, which is that's everything in the cancer space for sure. And
Stage are
so
you in with that cream right now?
that's in what's called a phase 1B/2A. Cancer drug research is kind of an interesting, industry within an industry, if you will. And so there are blurred lines between phase one and phase two, and that's where they came up with the idea of phase 1B/2A. We're kind of in that hinterland or that in between period where we get to focus on specific indications, specific disease states, but in a little bit more of a limited way. And that's great for us because it keeps costs down, but especially in the topical space, it allows us to see effect and benefit very quickly because you can just look at the skin and immediately tell that it's working. And that's why we like the topicals and dermatologic space in general, because it is a quicker path to exit specifically for that drug in particular.
Sounds like a better path for those afflicted by the problem as well.
So,
Um, Talk a little bit about GZ17. You know, that's our other drug that's in trial
mhm,
stage. Um,
yes. So we call it 6.02 for short, and it's as an oral capsule. It's again makes it a little easier for patients to take the drug, as opposed to going to the infusion center, sitting down, getting the IV, and sitting there for several hours, and then dealing with some of the immediate side effects that occur, in the infusion centers, the nausea, the vomiting, and so forth. Patients can take this, bottle of pills home and take it, in the comfort of their easy chair. Um, and so, right off the bat, we think that that's going to increase that patient adherence and that they will take the drug more routinely, more religiously. And the other aspect of our drug that I think is helpful is that the side effects are minimal. We saw no grade 4 or grade 5 toxicities in our phase 1. And so minor, GI irritation and some minor elevations in transaminase. And that was really the extent of it. So as cancer drugs go, it's extraordinarily safe and well tolerated, and the effectiveness is there. We see evidence of biological effect, is what they call that, and so now we're honing in particular on in the case of our current phase 1b/2a trial that's going on right now. It's in advanced prostate cancer.
Fantastic. And tremendous upside potential on both of those drugs. Now, uh, when you're developing drugs, IP becomes very important. Talk to me just briefly. We're running out of time here on the pharmaceutical side, but talk to me briefly about what your IP strategy is and how important it is to protect that.
It's absolutely central, so you can't really go through drug development without a very well thought out patent strategy. And in our case, uh, possibly because of our experience in another industry, we had a whole significant, list of patents in our portfolio previously. And so we're very familiar with the world of patenting and patent strategy in general. And so what we did is essentially what I call the briar patch method of patenting, which is to patent your central idea and then to derivate on your central idea and create patents all around it so that someone can't come up with something that's just different enough to get around your patent, but still same enough to achieve the same results, which happens with some frequency actually in the pharmaceutical world, and we know that going in. So we adopted a very aggressive patenting strategy that takes us all the way out to I believe 2038, if memory serves.
That's fantastic. So that is the pharmaceutical side of the business, and we're going to be talking about entities kind of coming forward. What's the entity that handles the pharmaceutical?
That's Genzada Pharmaceuticals.
Okay, and that's Gensada Pharmaceuticals USA as opposed to Gensada Pharmaceuticals LLC, right? One is the
Correct.
one is the manager
Next.
of right. And then the other one is USA is the holder of those pharmaceutical
Correct. And I should I apologize. I should have been sharing a screen here. Let me just do that real quickly so it gives a little bit of a visual. Um, and then we can uh, go back, but if needed. So our and hopefully everyone can see that now.
Yep.
Okay. Um, so our pharmaceutical drug development is the entity here called Genzada Pharmaceuticals. Nutraceuticals is our Hyatt Life Sciences division, and then actually Onc Life Sciences is our patent holding company, and so that's all plays into kind of a larger tax strategy. When we set up the businesses, we deliberately set it up in such a way that there's a lot of tax planning and essentially a tax advantageous environment that we've created for ourselves here. So that's the goal for that.
So,
And then
so
we have
investors can kind of
so
see this
mhm,
clearly. So here you see your investment goes into NextGen Scientific. NextGen Scientific is managed by Genzada Pharmaceuticals LLC, which also is the primary owner of Ionix Life Sciences. So NextGen Scientific is then going to invest. the invested money that comes in through this offering into Ionix Life Sciences, which has as its subsidiaries Shinzada Pharmaceuticals USA, Hyatt Life Sciences, which is the nutraceutical side, and Onc Life Sciences, which, of course, as he just said, holds the patents. I think that about sums up the structure side. Why don't we move into the Hyatt side? So we're talking really today is a lot about how having that nutraceutical division side by side with the pharmaceutical creates that unique advantage for you. Let's talk about that nutraceutical business in a little bit more detail.
So in broad terms, the nutraceutical space has just exploded is probably the best word I can describe. Significant growth as a result of COVID. We believe largely driven by COVID, as well as an aging boomer population. And so the baby boomers have really had a lot to do with the growth in that space. They're much more prevention minded in their approach to health and wellness, and also the millennials. Interestingly enough, that's all happening, and then on top of that, coming out of COVID, everyone generally seems to have a significant amount of interest in preventative care now as well. So the space has grown dramatically, and I think it's 759 billion by 2034. So we're looking at just a very large, just addressable market just right off the bat. And let me bring up, sorry, I again need to bring up these slides here. The addressable market being so huge, but then obviously the notion that this industry is quite, there's a lot of differentiation there, and so a lot of competition in the marketplace. But that's where we believe our products, having very unique ingredients like the Arum palestinum, and one other that is actually also a very unique one called Peganum harmala. Those two together, plus the other combination of ingredients in our products, and there's several more, not just the three that you see on the screen. Those are all that's what makes it patentable, and therefore differentiates us very quickly in the marketplace.
And with a nice $759 billion addressable market, that's, small growth can mean big dollars.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think rough numbers, if we had 0.5% of the addressable market, we'd have $100 million valuation for Hyatt Life Sciences alone,
No,
which is
fantastic.
a significant dollar amount for sure.
Absolutely.
And one other thing I think that's maybe important about Hyatt and what we're doing here, we build all of our own products in-house. We encapsulate here. We do the testing in here on the ingredients. We get outside third-party confirmation of the testing. So we're selling a very unique product that's patented, but we're also selling a product that has been proven safe for consumption and also free of any contamination. And we place a high value on that in part because it's the right thing to do, but also in large part because that's what the consumer base looks for in particular. They're looking for things exactly like that, high quality and effectiveness.
And in terms of your delivery platform, this e-commerce platform that's serving these up, that's fairly new, isn't it?
It is, and it's growing. And our main challenge, and this is where we would spend a lot of the monies that would go towards marketing. A large amount of that money would go towards basically just brand recognition.
So since we're talking a little bit about use of funds, we might as well move into use of funds. Certainly the Reg D is raising $10 million. Just, I hadn't said it before, but this offering is a Reg D offering. So as you responded to ads to come here, and those who are all here, I'm assuming you are all accredited investors because this offering is only for accredited investors. There is an intention to potentially uh, launch a Reg A, which would allow unaccredited investors to participate. But as of right now, the Reg D is the only thing that is active, and that is what we're here talking about right now. So tell me a little bit about the use of funds from this 10 million. How much impact will that have for you?
Just that amount alone would be very significant for us in the business. I mean, it allows us to move drive the science forward quite dramatically, is the way I think of it. We would be thinking first about our topical drug and the ability to test, obviously in actinic keratosis, but also and that which those studies are largely funded already. But the additional studies that we have in mind, which are interesting enough, not necessarily directly on point with cancer, but are closely related to cancer, such as atopic dermatitis, eczema, another name for it, and then psoriasis as well. Those are just absolutely widespread skin problems that affect millions more. And so, just right there alone, we would demonstrate safety first and foremost, and then we would start demonstrating efficacy. These are all highly related to cancers because they are all generally in the bucket of inflammatory disease, and we think we're affecting and interrupting a lot of the inflammatory markers and inflammatory response, and then essentially kind of reestablishing a normal or healthy cellular process, and that's what this is all about with the atopic dermatitis.
Yeah, I mean that's exciting. And so is all atopic dermatitis is eczema?
Um, I believe it's basically just a synonym for it. So you have eczema, which is one subset, and then you have psoriasis, which is another distinct disease, both of which appear to have response to the GZ21T.
So while they can develop into cancerous, they don't start as cancerous, and essentially your cream will treat both, right? So it will treat the just the base eczema and also treat it when it becomes cancerous or
That's
hopefully get rid
exactly.
of it before it becomes cancerous, right?
Exactly. That's the goal of this testing that we would have in mind as well. And so, in addition to the 21T, we also have in mind other studies for 6.02. Pancreatic cancer actually is one in particular that we saw some what they call preclinical indication of success. And so that'd be one place where we're looking first and foremost as well.
Okay. And is that all of this that this 10 million is going to is on the pharmaceutical side, or is there work on the nutraceutical side? Is there any of this going to marketing dollars for nutraceutical? Um,
I would say we're probably going to carve out maybe 100,000 or so for high-up marketing, and just with that 100,000, I think we can do a lot of good with just a short amount or a small amount of money like that. Not small it's still a lot of money, but small in the overall sense, and we can definitely ramp up Hyatt's sales, I think, very rapidly.
right, certainly 0.1% of the raise, but you get a lot of impact from that 0.1%. So that's exciting. Um, you've got some milestones that are kind of lined up here. Let's talk about them. You've got milestones for GZ21T, GZ17.
Yeah, so essentially, it boils down to regulatory approval, and those are, once we complete the phase 1B/2A studies in 6.02, and then also the 1B/2A in 21T. I think what we'll find is and this is kind of where it starts we start thinking now about exit potential. Because with 21T in particular, if we can demonstrate effectiveness in an actinic keratosis model, that becomes very interesting, I think, to a larger pharmaceutical company with such as a Galderma and those kinds of businesses that are focused on the derm space in particular. And we've already started having conversations with some of these companies just to let them know that we're here, let them know that the research is ongoing, and to really start to establish that relationship. So those conversations begin long before the trials are done and long before you actually hit some of those milestones. But we want to be ready for the next step immediately after that trial is complete.
And that's certainly music to investors' ears, right? That's what everyone wants to hear about. And so far today, we've heard about the impact that this investment can have. You're helping people that are suffering from eczema, potentially precancerous. You're helping people with other cancerous issues. So there's an impact side of it as well, but there's also an investment side. And let's talk a little bit about exit potential here. And first, we're going to disclaim this by saying that past performance is not indicative of future performance, and exits may or may not ever even be contemplated. So, that being said, let's talk, Jason, about kind of how close you could be to a potential exit event and where those could happen, because there are multiple areas that could happen in. Let's talk about that so that the investors can get kind of an idea of where the potential wins are here.
Sure. I would say, broadly speaking, I think that the exit potential or the routes of exit, there's several that could occur. One is that a large pharmaceutical company comes and says, "Hey, I really like this molecule or this drug, and we'd like to buy or license that from you," which happens all the time. Another is they like the entire business and they like the pipeline that we've been working on kind of behind the scenes of additional molecules. They like the current drugs in clinical trials. And so they say, let's just buy the whole business. That's another thing that happens with frequency. And then the other possibility is that we look at it and say, let's go ahead and go public and raise capital and establish a sales force, and we sell the molecules ourselves to the oncology space. The going public, is the exit at that point, of course. And so any and all of those, I think, are possibilities. And it remains to be seen, and I think that's going to be largely driven by the science. But those are all the ways that we see potentially unfolding. And
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, you asked about timeline. I think I just skipped over that answer. I think specifically with the 21T, I think we would be looking somewhere in the range of 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, presuming that we're able to ramp up quickly and perform the studies that we have in mind to perform. That really accelerates the timeline. And so that's what we would be envisioning. The 6.02 is a little bit of a longer road. That could be, 3 to 3.5 years.
If there were an exit option that were your choice, which would it be?
I would love to see, in part, and I'm a little biased here, of course, so I'll give you the biased answer. I think a company like Merck, Pfizer, GSK, and the like, those companies would do well to buy the whole business, because what they're buying then is not just the molecules that we've developed thus far. They're buying some very unique compounds that we just haven't had the time or the resources yet to develop and take further. But these are sitting on the shelf right now, ready for a Merck or a Pfizer with a large R&D budget to come in and start doing those very day one. And so I would love to see those molecules also get an opportunity to be taken further, because there's already promise in those molecules. And so if we see those compounds going down the development path, we can start helping more people across the globe more quickly.
Absolutely. And in now that was the one that I asked which you preferred. Which one do you think is the most likely?
Most likely, I would say, is 21T, I think, is going to be developed and commercial much earlier than anything else. And that one in particular, I think, is the quickest one for exit, or exit on that molecule, I should say.
Okay. So investors, we've presented a lot of information to you today. I don't see any questions that have been asked yet from the attendees here. You're free to ask them for the remainder of the period. We've got another 15 minutes here to the webinar. And what I'm going to do is just ask a few questions of Jason here. But we could go on for Jason, how long can we go on for hours and hours on this? And there are so many areas that we haven't even explored yet in this particular webinar. There will be more webinars that come, and the intention is for each webinar to have a little bit of a different take on what we're talking about, so that we're delving into potentially a little bit different rabbit hole each webinar. So if you are on this webinar, do keep an eye out for future webinars because I think that they will all be informative for you. Let's start out with how does the dual engine model reduce investment risk compared to the pure play biotech? So we talked about what it means to the company. What does it mean for an investor to invest in that type of a model?
I think it's driven by this notion of, plan for the worst, hope for the best. And was that Zig Ziglar? Maybe I can't remember who said that originally, but it's wise words regardless.
I
And
I do it
and
all.
essentially, there is the potential, of course, for failure in any business. And we don't like to talk about failure, but I think it's necessary. If you're a prudent businessman, you think about it and you plan for it and you address it, head on in any way you can. And so, our view is we have two drugs that are vastly different, same base chemistries, but vastly different in terms of where they're at and where they can be, valuable to, from an value inflection standpoint, and also from an exit standpoint. Um, and one of those could fail, the other one could fail, uh, maybe they both fail. But we also have as a backup plan, and not an insignificant backup plan, I should say, is Hyatt Life Sciences. That in and of itself, standalone, could be an absolutely massive business. And we think that in particular, because of the fact that our products are considered part of the Chinese, Eastern and Chinese medicine traditions and the Ayurvedic traditions that you find in India, we could market with the right testing, and some of the, you got to do some work, but with the right testing, those products could be marketed as drugs in those countries and elsewhere. The United States is only a small part of the overall nutraceutical space. And so, for folks like us, and we're thinking globally, and we do have the background and the knowledge of how to scale businesses internationally, and so this is not new for us, and this is within reach. Take some work, but we can definitely do it as well. So that's why I think it's different in many respects from a pure play biotech investment.
Yeah. I definitely can see that. Especially when you're saying that a half a point in growth equals $100 million. Well, you can quickly see with that type of calculus that this play could be entirely Hyatt, and still be a win for investors, which is, boy, what isn't that a great position to be in?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's ask another question. What are the key de-risking milestones that you've already achieved?
For both of the drugs, I think the biggest is going to be getting to this point in the clinicals process thus far. So, getting to phase one is a feat in and of itself. Getting past phase one is a feat in and of itself as well. And so, that it alone, when you demonstrate safety, and safety I wouldn't say that it's the number one priority because I think effectiveness is probably the number one priority in drug development, but closely on the heels is safety. It has to be a safe drug in order to take it, and we've demonstrated already that there is signals of efficacy, but very importantly, the safety is there, and that is kind of your entrance gate, if you will, into the larger uh, process of drug development. So those two things alone, I think, are really, really big for any drug program. The fact that we've done it with our very first two compounds in the drug development space is very unique indeed.
One of these questions actually I think is one that we should go into. So what we've talked about this great opportunity. What are the specific investing terms and minimums that are involved in the offering? What are you offering for a security?
So our Reg D offering is essentially a share. This is shares in NextGen, and then NextGen will turn around and use the proceeds to purchase in Ionics, which is our entity that was formed in. And I probably glossed over this. I apologize, Ben, if I glossed over it previously, but the tax planning that I mentioned earlier, Ionix is actually domiciled. It's in Ireland, and so that's really all about. They have a really very business friendly climate there, very very tax friendly climate there, and so we're availing ourselves of those lower tax rates as a way to conserve cash, and then also it de-risks it if especially for those folks who are investing from in Europe, for instance, or a non-U.S. jurisdiction, essentially, they would potentially see those tax rates all the way through, even to their dividend checks. Of course, the U.S. investor would be investing and then eventually going to need to pay Uncle Sam his due, but that's the security that is ultimately being purchased is NextGen, which then is going to be investing the monies into Ionics. And then it trickles down to Genzada and Hyatt for research purposes.
Uncle Sam is the gift that keeps on giving.
You got to pay the piper. That's right.
Well, this is really exciting. I think we had a number of attendees here, which is great. They got some good information. I think things that we want to leave them with. What would you say, Jason?
If I can sum it up in a few words, um, it is not hard to get up in the morning and come to work at this company. We're doing something that's very unique, and I don't know that very many people get to say that they're working on a cancer drug, and they also get to work on a more of a preventative aspect with the nutraceuticals as well. So we get to help people coming and going, and both at the beginning and at the other on the other end of a health issue. And to me, that's very gratifying. But it's got to be more than just gratifying, right? We're doing this not for practice, but for profit. And so I think it's important that we look at this every day and say, how do we make sure that we're protecting the investment in every way possible while still advancing the science forward? And that's something that we all are. It's baked into our DNA, I think. And so we're here to be successful for sure, but we're also here to be very helpful to a fellow man.
A very investable offering. Um, how do we go about investing in this offering?
Well, I think the first thing is to contact you. That would be one way to do it.
It would. So
And
to that
yeah,
end, I am
yeah.
available to everyone. So the NextGen has actually hired me to do their investor outreach. So if any one of you have any questions or would like to set up a one-on-one with me on my calendar, that is available to you. We can talk about the deal. We can talk about the fundamentals. We can talk about other aspects of it as well. You can also go to investinnextgen.com, and that will give you a lot of information about the offering. It will also allow you to download the PPM right from that site and review it. And then you can even invest directly from that site by just clicking that invest button. That'll take you through that whole process. Very friendly. So we want you to download that PPM. We would like you to take a look at the subscription document. And if you have any questions, schedule an appointment with me. We're here to talk at any point. If you want to contact someone within Genzada, you can contact them at investor.relations@genzada.com. And the phone number there is 620-204-7150. I want to thank you all for your time today and your interest in NextGen Scientific. We look forward to seeing your name and your faces again in the future. And come join us for another webinar. Thank you. This has been Ben and Jason signing off.